So let's say that you're getting into tabletop miniatures wargaming, and you're getting into one of the army style games, your Warhammer 40K, your Warhammer Fantasy, even something like War Machine, and you've got now a lot of models to paint. You've put them together, you've based them, whatever you're going to do, but you're looking down the barrel of anywhere from 50 to maybe 200 models, and you're thinking to yourself, well, how am I going to paint all these guys? I've never done this before necessarily, or I've only done it a little bit in small quantities. What can I do to make this work a little better? What can I do to speed things up? What can I do to make them still look good? If you've been watching a bunch of videos on YouTube, you've probably seen a lot of people talking about how you should get yourself an airbrush. And I don't disagree with that. I own one myself, but sometimes either you don't have the money for it right away, or you're not 100% sure you want to invest the money because you don't know exactly if you'll be doing this in another couple of years. So you think to yourself, well, I don't know if airbrush is right for me. And then you think to yourself, so what am I going to do? Paint all these guys with a brush? It becomes very daunting. So you have to start to think about other options. I've been there. I've done the same thing myself. And I'm going to try to share with you today a little bit of what I learned that kind of can help you speed things along. So this is a spray can. It is filled with paint and propellant and some sort of metal or plastic doohickey. That's why they call it a rattle can. If you're looking around online, a lot of modelers have a tendency to refer to this as a rattle can because it rattles. So, you're used to probably seeing people talking about using this kind of can to prime your models. And most people do it that way. If they're not going to use an airbrush, they usually prime with some sort of aerosol spray can. So the question is, how can you maybe prime, base coat, and maybe even highlight all in one or a couple of steps, saving yourself a whole bunch of time? It's doable. It's something you can do. When I first started playing, I wanted to do Tau because I originally was thinking to myself, there's not a lot of modeling to Tau. It's very quick and simple. You put them together. They all kind of look the same. There's not a lot of skulls to paint, generally. So I think Tau is the way for me to go. Now, the general idea behind the Tau, when you see them in the books and the magazines and whatnot, they're usually kind of a sand color. But that's not the only color. There's all kinds of different colors of armor in the Tau civilization, but the ones you usually see on the cover of the book are usually the kind of sand-colored guys. Well, I wanted to do something different, and I also wanted to make it quick. I wanted to do something that was quick, but still, didn't look sloppy necessarily. So I started doing some research, going around to stores, and I came across this stuff here. This is a duplicolor Sandable auto primer. They make a bunch of different types of primers, and a lot of people, use like the black or the gray of this as their normal primer, and then they go from there and base coat and all that stuff. But you'll notice here, this one is kind of a weird red color. Red primer, they call it. Some people call it red oxide primer, but it is not black. It's a red, but it's also a primer. You may start to see where I'm going here. If you take this and you prime your miniature with it, you have now primed it, but also base coated it kind of a dark red, which is sort of cool. So then the wheels start turning and going, well, what can I do to now add a highlight to it? With red, I have found it almost impossible to find a light red without it being pink. That's what generally light red is pink. But that doesn't mean you can't use another color. If you look at the color wheel, and I'm sure all of you out there have got one, right at arm's reach at any time. But if not, look it up online. If you look at the color wheel, the next color up from red, kind of, that seems to lighten it, is maybe orange. In comes a weird little can of orange spray paint. And this is where my Tau started. So I took these guys, and I primed them all red oxide. And primed them. And then I thought, I want to highlight them. I'll just spray them from above. And that's kind of what I did. And it worked out pretty well. I just basically spritzed them from above with this orange color. And I caught, just all the parts that the light would hit, and then the parts where the light wouldn't hit on the underarms and in between the legs and stuff like that stayed this dark red color. And it made this nice little gradient, and everything looked kind of highlighted. And then basically everything else that you're seeing here is either a wash or a relatively simple base coat. The boots are like a brown color, and the gloves are a gray color, and the silver bits on it are obviously a silver metallic. Everything else is just done with GW washes, Games Workshop washes, on top of the mixture of the red with the dusting of the orange. These guys got painted up really quickly because of this, and I think it's a great idea, and I've done it more in the past, and I'm going to be doing it again more in the future. When the Dark Vengeance box for 40K came out, it came out with Chaos Cultists, which were really cool little, easy, snap-together, quick models, but they had a lot of personality, and there's a zillion of them. And if you're one of those guys like me who goes on eBay and buys a bunch of extra stuff, you can have a whole bunch of cultists put together pretty quickly. In this picture, you will see a little less than half of all the cultists that I have put together, based, and colored. With these guys, I used basically mixtures of different paints. I would take like a black primer and spray, and then I would maybe dust it with a red, like this. Or I would take a dark green, like this, and then I would dust it with a light green over the top to give it a highlight. There are different camouflage paints out there, which are always very flat. Camouflage doesn't work if it's shiny, so the camouflage paints are always very flat. And that's kind of great because you want a flat paint if you're going to eventually put, actual other colors over the top of it with a brush. If it's a real glossy paint, it has a tendency to sometimes bead. It doesn't work as well. So other camouflage colors, dark tan and light tan, you see where I'm going here. You put the dark color down first, and you want to make sure that it's at least some kind of primer or some kind of, like I said, very ultra matte, very flat paint. You spray that down, and then you let it dry, and then you dust it from above with a lighter color. Now there's two different ways to dust it from above. Like I did with these Tau guys, I dusted them straight down pretty much. Like at a 90-degree angle from the ground, I sprayed straight down so that the bright orange color just really collected on the top of the head, the shoulders, tops of the arms, top of the rifle, that kind of stuff, but it kind of faded as it went down the rest of the body. In some situations, like let's say if you prime black and now you want to use another color and you want the second color not to be as much of a highlight but more of the dominant base, and you want the original primer, which is usually black in this situation, to be more of a shadow and less of a base, then what you do is you do the black, and you spray that first, and then once it's dried, you take your secondary color and then you spray it at the model at kind of like about a 30-degree angle, maybe a 45, and spray all the way around. The reason you're doing that is because you want it to collect on the top parts and a little bit on the sides, and then fade to all the under parts, in between the legs, underneath the arms. Those are the places where the shadows would normally hide, and those are the places where you need to kind of add something to give it that look. When you paint guys this small, you have to kind of over-accentuate the shadows and over-accentuate the highlights to a degree, especially when you look at them from a distance. So doing this kind of two-step, you could even do three-step if you wanted to do like a black primer and then a color and then maybe even a lighter color from a real, straight down. You could do something like that. It's a very quick process. And it makes the models look really good quite quickly. Now, here you'll see two models that were done with this process. You've got one that's got a brown kind of base and then a light brown, and then you've got another guy here who's got like a dark green base highlighted with a light green. They're both Chaos Cultists. Now, I took both those guys, I mounted them on pill bottles, and then I spent about 2 hours painting last night, and then I just dull coated them, about an hour ago. And this is what they look like after a quick 2 hours. And I wasn't really pushing it. Secondly, I was trying to go maybe just a little bit nicer than I normally would. So if you really wanted to, you could take models like this that have had this quick rattle can spray, and you could pretty quickly, especially if you kind of gang them all together and put them in a group of 5 or something like that, you could crank them out pretty quickly and make them look pretty good with less work than you would normally expect. The real honest-to-God secret is washes. Once you do this base coat and this highlight, there are going to be parts you're going to need to paint. The boots probably need to be black or brown. Gloves might need to be a certain color. Skin tones, obviously. If they've got bare arms or a bare face, you've got to paint it with skin. But everything else you can do with just straight washes. This towel, like I said, the boots, the gloves, and the silver metallic bits are the only parts that are real paint. Everything else is done with layers of washes. His pants are just a bunch of brown washes on top of each other, on top of the red oxide that was the main spray on that figure. So honestly, figuring out how to do this rattle can trickery can really help you get through a bunch of troops quickly. If you've got an airbrush, that's probably better. You can get more done. You're going to waste less paint. This does not save a lot of rattle can. You're going to be spraying, and there's a lot of overspray. Airbrush really helps you with that. But on the other hand, this is maybe $5-6 for a can. But something like this can really help you get through a lot of figures. Orcs, Tyranids, anything where they're Imperial Guard. I'm not calling them another thing. But you can really crank through these guys pretty quickly and then get something that really looks nice on the tabletop and doesn't take too much work. And you don't have to go out and invest a bunch on an airbrush and a compressor. And then maybe after a while, you'll decide you really enjoy this hobby and you will move towards an airbrush and compressor, and that's great. But these things are always for sale, and they'll always be available.